Hello, and thanks to Mike Church for joining me on our Meet the Artist today. Mike, you've got such a fabulous range. I've always been very envious of your ability to work successfully in so many different styles. It's a real trick. It'll be really interesting for our KJA White Light NFT communities to find out a little bit more about you and the incredible depth and diversity of your abilities and talents. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to ask you some questions.
For sure. Far away.
Okay. How long have you been an artist for, Mike?
Um, uh, I would say it dates back to a small plastic orange box that my mother kept buttons in, and I drew some Roman soldiers on it when I was about 3 or 4.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long have you been commercially involved?
When I did before I went to art college, I did some things, but not necessarily that commercial. But I just used to sell the odd watercolor painting to a local shop,
Okay.
things like that. On leaving college, I after a few jobs, normal jobs, I drifted into animation in the early '80s. So I started, just painting cells and tracing the characters and things. And I stayed in animation until the mid 2000s. And at that point, the whole industry was in a state of flux um, as it was digitizing and everything. And for a little while, doing TV commercials was my bread and butter.
Okay.
And for a while, they changed into 3D, and I had a go at doing 3D, and I didn't like it. It was boring, really tedious,
Yeah, it takes
stuff.
takes a long time in 3D to do stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
well, not so much nowadays, but we'll talk about
uh,
that later.
and are
but
you?
um, but yeah, so I got a job at Clarson's, a branding and packaging agency, in 2007.
Yep.
Um, and so I was there as a full-time illustrator for 7 years. So
Yeah.
I was just working on labels and visuals and photography, and through all the things you'd see on a bottle of whatever, from soft drinks to whiskies and vodkas and all sorts.
Sure. And indirectly, I suppose that's how we came to work together, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I left in 2014, yours was one of the first agencies I approached, and I was lucky enough to be accepted
Yeah.
because somebody with my range doesn't normally get represented by an agency, because they want you for one style, and they don't really want a jack of all like myself.
Well, that's why we wanted you, because we wanted somebody that could do so much, and that's, as I
Yeah.
alluded to just a minute ago, it's the thing that I'm hugely envious of, is just that huge breadth of talent that you've got.
Well, the result of that is through working in animation, where every few weeks you'd have to master a new style of either
Sure.
drawing or what we used to call rendering, which was where you would use colored pencils to do things like the film The Snowman is a good example of
Yeah, no, absolutely.
that kind of thing. But you do commercials in loads of different styles. You do them in watercolors, like the Purcell adverts in the 2000s is a good example of that. They were always watercolors. Tetley Tea, another job I worked on, also painted in watercolors on paper. I did backgrounds for quite a few years at the tail end of that initial animation career, and I through backgrounds I ended up doing animation layout, which is basically taking the rough panels of the storyboard, drawing the aspect that is needed for the actual scene, and draw up props and things, all in the style of the actual film or
Sure.
TV series or advert, whatever it is you're working on.
So
So that's how I got to be so versatile, is because I had to change to meet the styles of each particular thing that I was working on.
it's fair to say there isn't any particular style that you specialize in.
Uh, I have a sort of drawing base default drawing style, which is kind of realistic, but with my own twist on it. But I rarely get to use that. That's usually just at the sketching stage that's evident, you know. Then beyond that, it's whatever the style has to be for the
Sure.
particular thing.
And what software do you like to use? What's your favorite go-to?
Mostly in Photoshop,
Okay.
because I've I like making brushes, and Photoshop is the best app for that particular
Sure.
thing.
Absolutely.
But I use Coral Painter quite a lot, and when I have to, I'll use Adobe Illustrator, but I don't enjoy being in that space either, because it makes you think too hard. It gets in the way of the workflow for me sometimes.
Yeah, it stymies the creativity a little bit, doesn't it? It's
Yeah, yeah,
I,
that's what I
I
find anyway. Yeah,
I always struggle with that, and it's just not quite so intuitive.
yeah. And what
Uh,
else do I use? I've started using Affinity Designer, which is quite a cool little app.
okay.
And I bought it only because it cost me £24. And I thought, well, you know, for a sort of a mix between Photoshop and Illustrator, because you can work in either, you know, vectors or bitmap.
Yeah.
I thought that's quite a nice little bargain, and it's actually quite a nice app. It's one I would recommend if you can't afford Photoshop or something. You
Sure.
know, you could get that, and it would work. You know, 80% of the way. It
Sure.
doesn't have some of the features, but you know, if you just want it for drawing and painting, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
absolutely great.
I mean, that's the thing with Photoshop now, isn't it? It's just so all encompassing. You probably rarely use 10% of its capabilities. It's just so awesome.
Yeah. Uh, Although Painter does a lot of things that Photoshop can't do. So you know, I use Painter mainly. Uh, I love the palette knife oil thing. You've probably seen some of my oil painting with palette knife in Coral Painter. I love that, and I love the watercolor options that you have. Digital watercolor is very good, very quick for getting a watercolor feel down on what you might, you know, have used magic markers for, you know, in previous times. Although it has a version of that too. And
Okay.
then the pastels are brilliant. You know, if you recall the Ferdinand Frog book, I did
Yes.
that all in pastels in Coral Painter, and it had a lovely sort of slightly powdery feel about it, which
Yeah. I
I
didn't
think,
realize that. I didn't realize you'd done that particular book. Um, but no, the end result was beautiful. It was stunning.
yeah, it
Absolutely.
was a lovely book, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So going to styles, would you say your styles and approach have changed over time, or have you just adapted and added more?
Yeah, that's the latter. Definitely added more. The last couple of years, while I was working on the film Kensuke's Kingdom, um, I was doing background layout on that job, and then assistant animator later on. But uh, uh, because you had to sort of tonally get all the backgrounds, up and running, because the background painters, they didn't want them to have to do too much work. They wanted the majority of the work done at the layout stage.
Sure.
So I was basically making tonal jungles and beaches and you know uh, interiors and things like that. In Photoshop, and then they would paint over them in another app. Probably Painter. I'm not sure what they were using, but it
Sure.
was all painting was done in Luxembourg. I didn't really have the opportunity to do that in terms of the way the film deal was put through all the various partners that finance it.
Yeah, yeah. The
And
usual
one of them insisted
situation.
that the backgrounds be done in Luxembourg for some reason. But
And
but yeah, it was a great learning curve doing that because it was making me adopt a new style, which I've incorporated into everything else that I've done, consequently. So
brilliant.
So yeah, and it forced me to make lots and lots of new brushes because we're dealing with jungles here. So we have a wide variety of vegetation that we have to do quite quickly, but still retain the feel of the actual vegetation that we're copying, from our reference.
Sure. And have you used that vegetation sort of, with those sort of brushes for the muscelids, weasels?
Yep, you can see it. You can see it in there.
Okay, because I absolutely, it just makes me die when I see those, and hopefully the people watching now will get to see them at some point. But Mike's done this fantastic series. Where he's found the time, I don't know, but just an incredible series of muscelids, weasels, all doing crazy things, and you have to see them to understand it. But yeah, we'll make sure all that gets put out, so everybody who's watching now can see some of that. But the foliage and the greenery and the backgrounds and things on those are just incredible. They're just beautiful. So
Otter texting at the waterfall is my favorite one.
yeah, no, well, I think that was the first one that you did, wasn't it?
No, no, no. It was Weasel School.
Ah, okay, all right. My mistake.
Yeah, that was the one that I started with, and it was just like a little bit of woodland scenery. But I just wanted a focus of interest, and for some reason, that's where the weasel thing happened. It was just like,
Okay, that's how it started.
yeah, I have to admit that once I got into about the third painting, I realised that I was ripping off the German artist Michael Sowa. That's Sowa. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff.
No, it's probably not something you should be admitting here, Mike.
It's different. He has a different style of it and things, but some of the subject matter is kind of wild too. Like one of my favourites of his is this pig jumping off a diving board into a small lake in rural Germany somewhere, and it's quite forbidding kind of scenery, but done in a kind of 19th century painter style.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
What's that artist Friedrich? It sort of kind of reminds you of that.
Yeah, okay. And
Uh,
Mike, who would you say, or what's been your biggest influence in your career?
um, Initially comics. I collected American comics, so
Okay.
I thought for while I was in my early teens that I was going to be a comic book artist, and me and another friend used to make our own comics, and that was what I thought it was gonna be for me. Until I sort of got older and realised that I was not quite as invested in comics as I thought I was. Uh, but
That would have pigeonholed you far too much.
yeah, and I realised that what initially sparked my imagination were sort of late Victorian artists
Okay.
like Alma Tadema and Alphonse Mucha
Yeah.
and and Maxwell Parrish and
Okay.
Nicholas Roerich, who's a bit of an anomaly in that group, but there's something about his paintings which really sparked my imagination as well. You
Okay.
know,
And where do you find your daily inspiration, would you say?
by not thinking about things.
So it just comes to you.
Yeah, well, that's the point. You can't force inspiration. You have to literally do something entirely different, and just remain open, and then something will pop in at some point,
Yeah.
and you go, oh, that might be interesting. I might have a go at that.
Yeah. You can't push it, can you? You can't
No,
push creativity. It happens at its own pace. And do you have a favorite time?
yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in favorite type.
No, no,
What
sorry.
typeface?
Do you have a sort of favorite time of day to work and to create?
Oh, right, right.
Are you a
I'm a
night
morning
owl?
person. Morning person.
Oh,
Definitely,
really?
I lose steam by the middle of the afternoon, and it's a struggle to get through to 6 o'clock.
Okay. All right.
But I'm up at 7, and by 7:30 I'm beavering away. So, yeah, I've got more energy in the mornings for sure.
Okay, that's very different from. I think a couple of people have said that, but majority of the artists are basically night owls, which is, and I was always the same. I much preferred working late afternoon and into the night, but
Nope, nope, I couldn't conceive of that as being viable at all. I'm so glad that remote working is caught on a bit, and I've been able to do a lot more of it over the last few years because it's so hard by 5 o'clock, working in house, and it's
yeah,
like, I'd be so much more productive if I was at home.
yeah. Well, now you are, and so you
Yeah,
can be. And
yeah.
can you tell me a little about what you consider to be your top three pieces that you've ever created, and why?
I would say, remember, and this is for you as well, the art of astrology,
Yes,
uh,
the Russell
and
Brand.
and what a huge deal that was of a project. 90 pages of coloring book,
Yeah,
and because it's a coloring book, it has to have details.
yeah,
It
and
was
it's certainly detailed.
Yeah, and it was a huge effort on my part, but I did invent some new things, new styles that were new to me and I'd never seen before anybody else do. Within that, sort of like decorative features
Yeah,
that I'd
no,
invented on the fly, and they really worked well within the context of the book.
no, it was very ornate. So some people probably had a nightmare coloring it in.
Yeah, I saw a video a few years ago. Somebody had put up about the book, which was quite interesting. And yeah, they were saying, actually, I don't really want to color any of it in because it might spoil it.
Yeah, well, there is that. I mean, I've got a copy here, and obviously I haven't coloured it in. That'd be too much like a busman's holiday, and it would
Yeah,
destroy the look of your work because it was so pure as black line work. It was beautiful.
yeah. Well, some of it was more rushed than I'd like, but I didn't have long to do it, and it was a
I
huge
know,
amount of work.
sure. Um, and how would you say you continue to develop your skills and keep current with everything that's going on?
I'm not trying. Um, really. I'm kind of towards the end of my career, so I've got
Sure, surely not.
well, I'm 60. I'm going to be 61 next month. So there's that. But keeping up with the trends, it depends on whether they appeal to me or not.
Okay.
If it's something I think is cool and I can rip it off like we all do. Let's be honest. We rip it off, but when we rip it off, it changes and it becomes our own. If we're doing it with a good heart, we're not really trying to duplicate the thing. There's just an aspect of it that we appeals to us,
Yeah.
and we can incorporate it, and it changes, organically into your own way of doing things.
Well, yeah,
So
you put
so
your own
there's
spin
that.
on it. Yeah. And um, no, it's interesting you saying you get involved in more current stuff because you're interested in, or not. I totally get that. That obviously you don't want to be going down every line of avenue, but so
I'm not one of those people that is going to do something because I perceive it to be popular and it might have some traction with the young kids. I don't really see that as something that I can actually do because you can't second guess, the next generation along because they have a different mindset to you and they look at things in a different way.
yeah, no,
It's
100%, 100%.
so if it happens to connect, then that's brilliant. But I'm just have to do what I do and let the chips fall where they may.
Brilliant, brilliant. So finally, the burning question. So what's your interest in NFTs, and what was the driving force behind you getting involved with White Light NFT?
The driving force was you and Zoe approaching me and asking me if I wanted to be involved. To be honest, I wasn't sure if NFTs were really a viable thing. Like I said to you a while back, I'm not sure who would be involved in all of this, who would want these things. However, subsequently I've learned a bit more about it, and there are aspects of NFTs which I can't contribute, but there are areas that I can, and
Absolutely.
there's no sense in closing off all your options. If it's an option that is doable and is popular, then I'm more than happy to contribute. And and to answer your next question, no, I've never done an NFT before, but we'll see what happens.
No, it'll be really interesting because you'll bring your own spin to it, and you are a person who really knows their own mind, so that really helps, because you, as you were saying just a few minutes ago, you like to get involved in the things you're interested in because you're interested in them, not just for the hell of it. So we're very happy to have you on board, and
you have to be enthusiastic.
No,
if you're not enthusiastic, then you're not going to do good work.
No, absolutely. Well, we're very happy that you're enthusiastic about getting involved and seeing what you can produce.
Yeah, well, we will see. If you can point me, like an art director at certain things, and if I like the idea, then I can go along any particular direction. Like I say, as long as it's interesting.
Brilliant. Mike, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for getting involved with us today.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me, Kevin. It's been lovely.
Okay, and I will wait for the next development within the Weasels, because that always makes me laugh. And I will speak to you very soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.